Hello again, La-di-das and national spectators, and welcome to another episode here of the La-di-da Times, the audio version here. I'm Jeff Koslowski, and with me once again here is Marcus Razorback Dickson, and we're here to talk once again about upcoming games and how we're doing things a little bit differently with regard to our games coming up here. I think we had what I would consider a pretty successful first game, a unique first game here of 18 of rules from the 1845, utilizing the Knickerbocker rules here. And now we're ramping it up for our next game coming up here this coming Saturday. So just a couple of days from the time we're recording this, by the rules of 1857. And so what I wanted to do with this here is we're going to talk a little bit about 1845, what the world of baseball looks like between the mid to late 1840s going into the 1850s, and how this 1857 game is going to look. Marcus, thanks again for joining me on this.
Always fun to be here. Good things to talk about. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're hoping that we'll get some good weather this time. Last weekend kind of literally rained on our parade. We were coming down for the parade on Saturday against our friends from Bay City, who are celebrating their 20th anniversary, and so it would have been cool to play a game there. And doggone it if we don't get down the Walnut Grove after the parade, and we're getting flagged to come into the big barn, the shed as we call it, behind the first baseline, and just too much water dropped on us at one point in that instance there. So unfortunately our Saturday game got washed out this past weekend. Marcus, do you have any La-di-da or national memories of rain games or anything in which the weather played a prominent hand?
Well, I guess the two things, one, a game, and then sort of an outcome of that. The first year I played was the year that the World's Tournament was rained out. And so looking on the Greenfield Village Cup, it lists the victor of that year as Mother Nature. So I always appreciated that. But the rain was so heavy that people were literally standing with water up to their ankles, and you hit a ball and it splashed, and decided that we just couldn't do that. But related to that is I'm often asked about, what's the ball like? And one of the things that comes up a lot is that the ball, as it's made during our general era, had what the rules call yarn, what we would call twine, unlike a modern ball that has a waxed thread. And so if the balls that we use get wet, they just soak up water. And so I've taken balls home after games in the rain. They're supposed to be 5.5 ounces, and I've taken them home and weighed them at 11.5 ounces, more than double their weight. And when people we try to use those, imagine trying to hit that ball. That's 3/4 of a pound essentially, and then trying to throw or catch that ball becomes really dangerous. So those water games can just be really unsafe.
I definitely remember a game we played against the Mules of Canal Fulton at their place. And well, you want to talk about a team that was, baseball wise and professionally more geared towards dealing with water than we were. They put a good whooping on us on that game for a lot of balls that just didn't go anywhere. Just a lot of mud and slop, but they were bound and determined to get this game, and we were bound and determined to play as well. And but sometimes you get some fun, sometimes you get some hilarity out of rain games, but absolutely. It wouldn't have been that on Saturday here against Bay City. So so that game got washed out, and then the following day against the always tough Bear Clan Baseball Club of Flat Rock, a game for the Michigan Cup that the Flat Rock retains, and always a good game. I mean, this was a good back and forth game between them. It's a team that once they get hot, they're tough to slow down. But if you can keep them from getting hot, then it can be a real close one here. So congrats to the Bear Clan for their win on Sunday. This coming weekend on Sunday, we're going to welcome the early risers of Detroit back. They'll be coming in on Sunday. But it's the game on Saturday that we are of high interest of, and that is the game we're going to be playing by the rules of 1857. So we wanted to use our platform here to kind of talk about what is happening in the baseball world, what's happening rule-wise, and what could spectators expect to see, spectators and players alike. What could we expect to see and do? So Marcus, we just got out of the 1840s game. What was your takeaway from when we played it just a few weeks ago about that 1840s game?
I thought we did a good job of presenting that very early version of what we think of as baseball. It's always hard to know about the future and look back and not let your future knowledge affect your interpretation of what was happening in the past. We infer things to be consistent with what we've done, and one of the things I realized kind of after the game that we didn't talk about was that the modern understanding of the force rule is that if a player is being forced to the next base and the ball is held on that base, then they're out. But that isn't actually what the rules of 1845 say. They say if you're running to that base and the ball is held at the base, you're out. And so I think we missed a little bit on that one, and that's probably on me. But all in all, I think we did a real nice job of showing how flexible the game was relative to what we're used to, even in 1867. And certainly today, I think people had a fun time with it. One thing I did notice was that there were a lot of throwing and catching errors because the ball's larger than what our players are used to, and they were just trying to throw a larger ball and catch a larger ball, and that was catching them a bit off guard. I think if they used that regularly, that there would have been a lot less of those kind of errors. But boy, I think people had a good time, and it did take 10 innings to get to the required 21 runs.
I was really surprised about that. I was saying it was going to be considerably shorter than that, but then again, it also is a bound rule game. So, trying to learn something new and trying to learn something different, in a sense, on the fly. No pun intended there. I mean, that was something that I think we did. I agree. I think we had a good time with it once we kind of figured out the rules. It took us a few innings,
right,
to kind of figure out the rules, and then in a sense here that we are the ones, in a sense, kind of as players, we are the ones that kind of dictate the game. The umpire is just kind of there if we have a heated misunderstanding of that. So I think having the players there to figure it out, that seemed to make it flow. So good times there, but now we're fast forwarding from the Knickerbocker rules going forward. So Marcus, let's start with baseball history here. What is happening in the baseball world between the Knickerbocker rules and where we're headed in 1857?
So there's a few things, and in order to talk about any of this, I want to just be clear that I'm drawing on the work of a lot of really great scholars, of Richard Hirschberger and of I was talking just this week to John Zinn, weighed in on some of the things on our Facebook page, and looking at work of Peter Morris. And so I'm drawing on the work of a lot of other folks and trying to answer some of these things. One of the things to realize is that baseball started off with, there were so many early bat and ball games, many of which were even called baseball, or going back a little farther, bassball. So there was this kind of newer thing where we eliminated throwing the ball at people to put them out, in the 1845 rules. But those 1845 rules were written for this one club. They drew on some things other people were doing, like the Magnolia Club and the Putnams, but they drew on this one set of things so that they could exercise together for the most part. That's what the Knickerbockers did, actually, for most of their existence. They played more of their games against each other than they did against other clubs. But by a few years later, there were about 3 clubs that were together enough to be playing by some set of those rules. The game began to expand more. But when I say expand, we're still talking about a small number of clubs total. You know, there was finally a convention, quote, convention, that was held, a two-stage convention held in 1857, to say, hey, can we really get a handle on these rules? We think there's some revisions that are needed. And one of the big things that was happening there was that at the point where you've got about 16 teams meeting, suddenly the Knickerbockers are not completely in charge anymore. The way before it was our game, and now they're part of a group of clubs playing this game who are trying to figure some things out. At the same time, they were still the Knickerbockers, and they had a lot of influence in how things played out. So there was an effort to try to address some things that people thought were problems in the game, to a little bit more settled. There were some flexibilities, like how long is this game supposed to last? As we mentioned previously, the game would go until 21 runs were scored. That could be no time at all, or it could be a very long time. And so to try to specify a little bit more precisely how long the game would last, there were some ambiguities about the bases being separated by a certain number of paces. We wanted to clarify those things. So that was the primary driver. But one of the things that has become really clear to me, based on reading the works of a lot of other great historian folks, is that the rules are rarely changed by people saying, hey, I've got a new idea that nobody's ever thought of before. Let's try that. The rules change when either people are already doing something different. Maybe they've identified a loophole, but they're already doing something, and the rules need to codify that. Or we've identified a problem in the rules where things are just unclear, or the game is not going the way we want it to go because of an ambiguity, and so we're going to address that. So rules are often catching up with what's already happening. And that we see some of that in 1857. So they do some things like there was an 1854 tweak to the rules that first set the size of the ball. We clarify again the size of the ball here. They specify where the pitcher's line is, that it's 15 yards or 45 feet from home base, and that had not really been clarified before. Other things are still not yet the way that we think they're going to be. As you said, it's a bound game. It's not yet the fly game, although that conversation was already taking place. The Knickerbocker wanted the fly game, and the other clubs really kind of didn't. And so, according to Richard Hirschberger, the idea of that's in the 1857 rules that if you catch a ball on the bound for an out, the players can just keep running. They don't have to do anything like go back to their base. But if you catch the ball on the fly, then the players just get a free return to the base. So it's still an out, but now there is a reward for catching the ball on the fly. And so that was sort of a gift to the clubs that wanted the fly rule, to say, we're not going to require catching it on the fly, but we'll give a benefit if you catch the ball on the fly. So it was trying to satisfy the people who wanted the fly rule without actually giving them the fly rule. So I think there were a lot of things there that were being negotiated. The other one that again helped, I've changed my understanding of a little bit recently, is that it's only in the year 1857 that the rules have a referee. There's no other place in the rules where there is a referee. But if you look, that they were actually playing with two umpires and a referee. So what would happen would be each club would have an umpire that was a person from their club. And rather than being impartial, they actually just were essentially advocates. if there was a close play on the bases, play at second base, and the second baseman calls for judgment, the umpire for the, say, La-di-das and the umpire for the Nationals would each call out whether they thought the runner was out or not out. And if they agreed, then they were done. But if they disagreed, then there was a neutral referee, a referee from a third club, an impartial club, who would be the decider. In reality, the referee made almost all the decisions, because if it was close enough that the umpire, or if it's close enough that there was a call for judgment, then the umpires were going to disagree. They were each going to favor their own club in making those decisions. So it would go to the referee. Like I said, the rules only specify that in 1857. But if you go back and look in, say, the 1856 New York Clipper, you'll find that the very rudimentary box scores do mention umpire for team A, umpire for team B, and then the referee. And it often says referee from the spectators. In other words, the club brought up an umpire, the club brought up an umpire, and then the umpires selected from the people who were there at the game a person who was a member of a baseball club who would be the referee. That lasted one season because it was no point, right? They decided having two umpires always goes to the referee, so they got rid of that formally.
So yeah, seemingly a little too complicated going on here and not accomplishing what you want to accomplish here. So do we know where the umpires would have been? I mean, the immediate mind would think, or at least from a contemporary standpoint, you'd think, oh yeah, one at home, one at second. But it doesn't feel like that would be the case.
No, not at all, because they were doing the same thing. Like if you put an umpire at home and an umpire at second, that means they have different jobs.
Right.
But these umpires had the same job. They were to call foul balls and to call balks, and they were to make the calls, but they both made the call. If there was a request for judgment, they each gave their opinion. So I thought at one point that perhaps you had one standing the way the 1867 umpire does for a right-handed hitter and one standing the way you do for a left-handed hitter, so that you had one on each foul line to make those foul ball calls. I don't think that's actually the case. I talked a little bit with Richard Hirschberger, did some other research, and I think that they were probably just kind of standing up there together or sitting up there together so that they could have a conversation. That if there was a close play, both of them could make the call, and then they could turn and advocate to the referee to make the call. So I think they were probably just sort of over off to the side, and there are no foul lines yet. So they were not nearly as rigorous about, oh, that ball was 1 inch foul, as we are when the lines are drawn and it's much more precise. They were calling foul balls when they were really foul.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, yeah, if they have the same job, you figure they might as well be standing in the same place then. So you kind of get the perspective angle that if they're each to do a job, then they would be in the same spot with that. So, well, it'll be a new thing to kind of see and do. You don't often see, multiple officiants,
Right.
in that regard, at least in our 1867 game. So, so Marcus, let's get a baseline. What are the rule differences between, or like the most significant rule changes? If we tell somebody like, yeah, fast forward to this part in the video or something like that, where, what are the big differences that you're going to see in a 57 game versus either, 40s or 67? What's the big things we should find?
Well, the ones compared to 67, compared to what people who watch the La-di-das play, what they would be used to seeing. The one of them is that idea of the umpire, the two umpires and the referee. I've been advocating to the people in our club that they need to make sure to put on their resumes that they have been a baseball referee, because that's not something you often get to say. So that one's going to be one piece of it, is how that works. The second is the one I already mentioned, that when a fair ball is caught on the fly, the base runners get a free return to their bases. That there is that benefit to catching the ball on the fly. So that means that even by 1867, there was the idea of on a fly ball, a base runner might go part way to see if the ball's going to be caught, or they might stay at their base to, if it looks like it will be caught, to tag up so that they can head home. That's not going to be the strategy. When the ball gets hit, you should run. And because if it isn't caught, you're on your way. If it's caught on the bound, you're still on your way. And if it is caught, you just get to go back to the base. It is a bound game, meaning anywhere on the field, fair or foul, the ball can be caught on one bound for an out. The pitcher's line is in existence now. It's still at 45 feet, 15 yards. It's a 12-foot line, a 12-foot wide line. So the pitcher can kind of be coming from anywhere from 6 feet off of center to bring that in. And there is no back line. So as in 1845, the pitcher can take a bit of a cricket run, do a startup run up to deliver the ball. One of the things I appreciate about the Greenfield Village program, we really do try hard to get some things as much as we can to get it right. So for the 1845 game, we used balls that were, like I said, they were a bit bigger. They were a little harder for people to throw. That ball was 1 full inch larger in circumference and 1 ounce heavier than the ball we use in 1867. By 1857, the ball is right in the middle between those two. So we had some balls made to spec for 1857. So the ball that we'll be using is half an ounce heavier than what we're used to and half an inch larger in circumference. So not quite as bad as the 1845, not yet to 1867. And of course, the 1867 ball is a half an ounce and a half an inch larger than the modern ball. So we will probably have a little bit of challenges with those throwing things. Again, just getting used to that, but not quite as bad. As in 1845, there aren't any called balls or called strikes yet. So there's swinging strikes, and that's it. Coming the next year will be the implementation of strikes, and then we don't see balls until 1864. But we won't be seeing any of those, which means that the umpire has, a job of essentially just making sure that everything's fair and calling foul balls and calling balks. So they've got a little bit different, a little bit lesser job in that regard.
And we haven't, we here and normally in 67, based on like the concept of it's a show, it's a performance and all that, we have a modified version of stealing. And my assumption is it's going to be open stealing just like it was in 1845, correct?
Well, I would hope so. There's no reason not to. I think that the game was very active. Swift pitching certainly is beginning to exist. There's lots of documentation of, as Paul Hunkley will point out, of pitches being delivered with exceeding velocity. Now, what exactly that means, what was that is a little unclear, but it was definitely not a lob by this point. It wasn't. There were early bat and ball games where the person who delivered the ball was called the feeder, because that person really was to feed the ball in so that it could be hit. There were some versions of bat and ball games where the person who delivered the ball stood next to the hitter and just tossed it up for them, kind of like a fungo. But from early days of baseball, the pitcher was not lobbing it, but it isn't yet the swift pitching that would come in the 1860s following Jim Creighton and his early demise, but everybody trying to pitch swiftly the way that Jim Creighton did, who really pushed that forward. So I think that we will be seeing more running, and I presume it'll be an open. We won't be employing any of the restrictions that we sometimes use that are not historically accurate.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the pitching difference. We have a 12-foot line instead of our normal 6-foot line. And I know in the game, when our 1845 game, I was really trying to stretch that as much as I possibly could. It felt weird. It felt like I was almost pitching from first base into what the pitcher is, or to get the little bit of a running start. So hopefully our pitching staff will at least be able to try to experiment with it, and like, just, I don't do it for a few pitches and then just like, okay, we'll just go back to where I normally had been. Like, that's why they set up the box. But, if we got the room to experiment, then let's do it. Let's try something different here. From that.
One other thing to highlight about this rules compared to 1845, there will be 9 players on the field. That is, we played the 1845.
Oh, good.
And at the time, the 1845 rules didn't specify the number of players. It might be from 7 to 11 or 12 at different times. By the time we get to 57, 9 is well established as the default, but the rules didn't specify it until 1857. Okay. So we will actually have 9 players on the field. And looking at the rosters for that game, we may well have exactly 9 players available for each side for that game.
The dog days of summer are starting to kick in already. It appears there, but it should be fun. We had a good time with the 1840s game. The player feedback was really solid, and it was a fun thing to try to do and to experiment with. And I think it gives an overall good impression of the evolutionary aspects of the game, especially for the players who played in the Knickerbocker game and are now also going to play in the 1857 game. We have very limited experience in the 1850s. I think the last time we did was 2010 at Kent in the Grand Rapids. We played the Pierce Cup there, and I think we were one of the first teams to figure out the free return on fly ball rule. And other teams were a little late to the show to catch up on that.
Well, then those same players will get that other experience next month when we play a game of 1876 rules,
yes.
Which is the first year of the National League. And so, Jeff, I know you're already probably working on this, because at that point, pitching was sidearm below the waist.
Right.
So we've gotten beyond the straight arm of the 40s and 50s and 60s. So you're probably in the backyard with your daughter practicing those sidearms.
Does that mean I can pull my pants up? Is it waist, or is it officially belt buckle?
It's not yet belt. It's not yet belt. It's below the waist.
All right. Below the waist. Okay. So I can't pull my pants up to my armpits yet?
Not yet.
Oh, well. All right. Well, then I'll do it. Just I can't live by the rules by it then, I suppose. Marcus, thanks again for joining me on this here. For anybody who's going to be in the area, again, this is 1857 rules baseball as opposed to our normal 1867. La-Di-Da's versus Nationals this Saturday, July 19th. And if it's good, then maybe we can think about doing it again for next year again. And as Marcus mentioned, 1876, as well as a later on in the year, a picked 9 game, which will have something about what a picked 9 is and how that's different from anything like that. So until then, Marcus, thanks again for joining me here on our episode. If you're able to, again, Walnut Grove this Saturday, 1857 rules. Until then, strike well, and we'll see you out there on Walnut Grove.